This airport 10 miles, that one 10 miles, both.
The United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Will you please remain standing for the invocation by Jim Phillips? Jim?
Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we're grateful for this good day and for all that's been a part of it. We're grateful for Rotary, for the friends and fellowship we enjoy around these tables, and for giving us a broad view of community. And so we especially pray for those in China and Poland and Armenia and everywhere else in the world, for those who seek the basic freedom and dignity that we enjoy. We lift these people up to you today. Please bless this food to our bodies and us in your service. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen.
Be seated, please. Visiting Rotarians will be introduced by Glenn Watkins.
Thank you, Mr. President. Gentlemen, if you would please stand as I call your names and remain standing until we can welcome you as a group. First, we have old Cuz himself, Bob Watkins, Jr., whose classification, mechanical powers transmission from Atlanta. Bob, there you are. George Heary from Atlanta, architect. Jeff Russell from Stone Mountain, retail gasoline. Ted Owens, Stone Mountain, mortgage banker. Sam, B-A-R-E-N-S, how do you pronounce that? Barons? Well, I can't even read. Or he can't write, I don't know which it is. Nashville, Tennessee, consultant, welcome. Mike Griffin, Texas City, Texas, accounting, CPA. Gentlemen, we are delighted to have you. Please come back and visit with us again.
There are also members of guests. Stuart Farmer has a guest. Stuart?
We have two friends and associates of mine, First Atlanta, C.H. Ferguson and Steve Walker.
Delighted to have y'all here. Thank you for coming. Jim Dunn has a guest. Jim?
My guest today is Lynn Joyner. Lynn is with National Community Development Services and is currently serving as the project director for the Decatur program.
Glenn, thanks for being here. Good to have you. Wallace Daniel has a guest. Wallace? As most of you know, Mike is a former member here. Mike, welcome home. Delighted to have you. Bedros Sharian has a most special guest. Bedros?
President Houston, and my guest today is my father, Bedros Sharian Sr.
Welcome, sir. Delighted to have you. Mr. Sharian, when you get the biggest hand of anybody all year, that's kind of embarrassing to the club members. We're delighted to have you here, sir. It's a pleasure. Bill Kurtz has a guest. Bill?
Thank you, President Houston. My guest today is Jim Wallace, who is Executive Vice President and Chief Financial Officer of the State Federal.
Jim, thanks for coming. Delighted to have you. Joe Pewitt has a guest. Joe?
Yes, I have a brand new Rotarian here. He is Hamp Hart, who is Secretary of the U.S. Hamp Rotary Club.
Hamp, congratulations. We're delighted to have you. Thank you for coming. And the club has some guests who are members of the mayor's staff. If you please stand as I announce your name. Carol Moldauer, who is the administrative assistant. Carol, thank you for being here. Sandra Walker, Chief of Communications. Thank you, Sandra. We're delighted to have you. Neil Horton, Legislative Liaison. Neil, thank you for being here. William Jackson. Thank you, sir. Mayor's aide, thank you for coming. And Barbara Duncan. Barbara? she's gone. We were delighted to have her as long as she could stay. Chet Barnes has an announcement to make regarding the upcoming golf tournament. Chet?
July the 14th is the day. That's 5 weeks from today. This is a tournament sponsored by the Decatur Rotary Council. We're urging all members of this club to come out and participate. Last year we didn't do so well. We only had 5 players from this club. Right now we have about 10 or 12 players signed up, and we'd like to have at least 4 foursomes. So any of you that are interested, please see George Fellows or me. The fee will be $50, which is tax deductible. It's a benefit program for the Arrive Alive and the Decatur Rotary Council. The play will be under Lauderdale rules. Those of you that play golf know what that is. So it equalizes things so everybody has a chance to contribute. We hope that any of you that have not signed up that's interested, see George Fellows or me, and we'd like to get your name on the list. Thank you.
Thank you, Chet. And also, Rob Davison has an announcement. Rob? Ah, here you are. Thank you, sir.
I have, over the last, let's see, about 6 months, starting in January, I've communicated with many of you in this room, either personally after a meeting, before a meeting, by telephone, or a lot of you have sent letters to, and the reason being, as most of y'all probably know, because if your name's not on this board here, or this board over here, then I want to put it there in the near future. I've made a commitment, of course, as y'all know from the Sustaining Member Board, to the Rotary Foundation, and I intend to complete that commitment in the next few months. I've also made a commitment, which I think is equally important, to the Georgia Rotary Student Program, which I intend to complete in the next few months. So I hope in this calendar year to have my name moved to a different position on the boards. But in saying that, I want to say that the commitment to me is not so much the name on the board. It's not the Paul Harris Fellow designation. It's more so a commitment I made as a member of this Rotary Club. And that's really the message I'm just trying to get out. I really have been touched by so many of you have come up to me in a meeting and grabbed me, having gotten this letter. A week or two has passed, and you actually said, handed me a check and said, hey, I'm sorry I hadn't responded sooner. Those of you who picked up the phone and called me after receiving the letter, that's meant a lot to me. Those of you who've talked to me about it, you know, most every comment I've gotten, I've appreciated. I know many of you are probably still thinking about it. I'd like you to give it further thought, and I'd certainly like for you to try to respond to me and let me know, you know, what your situation is. I'll tell you from my own situation, and I've said this or tried to convey this every time I've been up here and in any letter I've ever written. I'm not going to neglect my church to fund the Rotary programs. I'm not going to neglect several charities, which I may be on the board of directors of or chairman in some cases of, to fund Rotary projects. But as a member of the Rotary Club here, I know that if I don't do something among my charity giving for the Rotary Foundation, that we won't continue to be the organization we are worldwide, touching so many lives in so many positive ways. And so I ask all of you to give it further thought, and please let me hear from you when you get a chance. Thank you.
Rob, thank you, sir. Thank you for the comments, and thank you for a year of good and hard work. Much appreciated. This is, as you can tell, one of the larger turnouts of the year, and undoubtedly the reason for this great turnout is our speaker. So without further ado, to introduce him, Dave Noble. Dave?
It's with great enthusiasm that I present our speaker today. The mayor and I have a couple of things in common. First of all, his brother's a dentist, and my brother-in-law is a dentist. But more importantly, he and I are members of the United Church of Christ. The mayor was born in New Orleans. He graduated from Howard University and the Hartford Theological Seminary. His experiences in life have been varied, from being a pastor in a congregational church in Thomasville, Georgia, executive director of the Southern Leadership Conference, a top aide to the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr., the first black congressman elected from Georgia in the 20th century, the United States ambassador to the United Nations, as well as being a cabinet member in the Carter administration. Fortunately for us, in 1985, he was elected mayor of the city of Atlanta with 81% of the vote. All here know of the growth of Atlanta from the 4th runway at Hartsfield to the new underground Atlanta and now to the new dome that have been accomplished during his term as mayor. I think almost more importantly, the mayor and his wife Jean have worked on the mayor's task force for public education, bringing us the Dream Jamboree to show educational opportunities to over 15,000 students annually. The mayor's scholarship program, where 4 $4,000 a year scholarships are awarded. And to me, a personal favorite, the Right to Read and the Principle of Alphabet Literacy program for learning to read and write while during paid working hours. His honors and awards and honorary degrees have been many, including, I think, the most important one, the Presidential Medal of Freedom, America's highest civilian award. I feel his new job as chairman of the Atlanta Organizing Committee for the Summer Olympics and his work with Young Ideas, a Washington, D.C.-based nonprofit organization for addressing the policy issues in the developing world, consume much of his time. It is with great personal pleasure I present His Honor, the Mayor of the City of Atlanta, Andrew Young.
Thank you very much, and it really is a pleasure to be here with you. I just don't feel right coming here, though, without dropping by to say hello to Robin Harris, a person who has meant so much to everything good that has happened in this region, whose spirit does continue with us, not only in this club, but throughout our metropolitan area. I think that looking back now on the last 8 years, and one of the first things I tried to do doesn't really come off until I'm about to go out, and that is Underground Atlanta. I can't imagine how and why it took us so long. But that's the way these projects run. And yet from the very beginning, there was something about coming together around Underground that I think pulled our city together. It was the beginning of something that I have come to call public purpose capitalism. For the city didn't have a lot of money, and we had to find a way to put a major capital improvement in downtown without taxing our citizens for it. Now, we did pass a sales tax referendum, and we took advantage of the first year windfall to set aside some money for Underground and also to set aside some money to build a new City Hall annex. That City Hall annex is open, and Underground Atlanta is opening, but you couldn't do much with $8 or $10 million in Underground. That was just a drop in the bucket, and the Rouse Company told us that it would be somewhere in the neighborhood of $120 million. It ended up about $142 million. But the $10 million that we started with ended up being seed money for an $85 million revenue bond and a private sector contribution by the banks and the businesses of Atlanta. Everybody made a commitment and investment in Underground. And it seems to me that once that commitment was made, things began to happen for us. It's been a long, slow process getting Underground open. But in the meantime, when people saw that the city was working together, the business community and City Hall, when there seemed to be a kind of public spirit around a central idea like Underground Atlanta, then that seems to me to have been the spark that allowed for a whole raft of new investments, private sector developments that have come into downtown Atlanta. There was no Ritz-Carlton in downtown Atlanta when we started talking about Underground. What is now the Marriott Marquis was a big hole in the ground. John Portman's In Forum was simply a dream that was having difficulty putting together financing. The future of downtown Atlanta was in doubt. But now I think opening Underground, having built a new city hall, having watched literally billions of dollars of new development come into downtown and midtown, I think that we have a formula by which government can continue to run if everybody works together without being an enormous burden on the taxpayers. The thing that has characterized, the thing that's made possible the success that has gone along with Underground and the airport and now the Dome Stadium was the fact that we're a growing economic environment. And so the most important thing, I think, particularly for the next mayor to think about, is how to keep the environment growing. Because these projects only make sense if your economy is going to continue to grow. The Atlanta airport makes sense because not only is it paying off the debt service, but it's putting aside money so that the new international terminal that we're opening in a few months, we didn't have to go back and borrow any money. We built that on the earnings. The new runway improvements that we're going to make, we should have enough money in landing fees accumulated to pay for the airport expansion. And so that's a money-making project that's paying off the debt service and making money for the capital improvements and the modernization and expansion, and it hasn't cost the taxpayers of the city of Atlanta 1 cent since Hartsfield bought that land years and years ago. Now the Dome is very much the same. The Dome, and it took a long time to get it understood because people don't believe that you can get something for nothing, but we're coming about as close to it in the Dome as you can. Because what we did with the help of the state was agree to tax our visitors. And so we've increased the hotel motel tax so that over the next 30 years, the people coming into our city, about 2 million of them a year, will have an extra 1 cent per dollar on their hotel bills that will go to the Dome. Well, when you got almost 2 million convention visitors, that 1 cent on a dollar, they spend in the last year about $255 a day. That adds up to quite a nice little piece of revenue. And so we will have a $150 million dome that will be paid for by the citizens who are using it. Now there will be additional fees. There'll be additional street improvements, but we would have had to do those anyway. There will be additional need for policing. Because with the presence of larger numbers of people, we are going to have to increase the police force. But every time that Dome opens up, it's going to pay taxes to the city and to the state. And so for the most part, the way we look at it, almost everything we've been able to do is paying for itself while giving us a significant amount of really new development and exciting employment opportunity in the central city. Now, everybody has said, and I have a regular visit to Dr. Radachek over at Georgia State for the last 4 or 5 years, and every year all of the economic indicators indicate that there's going to be a leveling off and a slight downturn. And it's almost like a record. And yet every year it seems to be a continual steady rise. Not a boom anymore, but a continual steady rise in the growth and development of the economy of this region. And I think that what has happened is that the city of Atlanta is only, and that includes Decatur, forgive me. Mayor Mears, I have a lot of respect for, and I'm on his turf, and I should be a little more diligent about remembering that Decatur was here before Atlanta. Let's say Decatur and her suburbs are destined for, I think, a continued growth because there is so much money being generated in the world today. and there are only a few safe places where it can be invested. There was a lot of money that was looking toward China. I bet you it's not looking there this morning. And that money is going to have to go somewhere. In Japan, they're generating about $1.1 billion that they cannot reinvest in Japan. That has to be invested someplace. The same thing is true, not to that extent, but a European community forming a new, almost United States of Europe is going to create an economic force in the world even larger than the United States or Japan. But where else can you invest in Europe? Europe is going to be generating wealth, but reinvesting in Europe, which is already so overpopulated, is only going to raise the prices up. And so development, I think, is still going to continue in the southeastern part of the United States. And development from the southeastern part of the United States and Atlanta, I think, is going to begin to find inroads in that 70% of the world which we call the developing world. One of the things that I think we're going to have to face in the turn of the century is that by the turn of the century, about 79% of the world market, population-wise, will be outside of the United States, Europe, and Japan. And that the successful businesses in the next century are going to be those businesses that have somehow figured out how to do business in this vast expanse of diverse humanity that we now call the third world or the developing world. Well, I contend that one of the reasons why we're doing so well is that we have, in miniature, in this metropolitan area, created an economy that reflects some of the general diversity of the world in which we live. And that people are learning, almost in spite of ourselves, to get along with each other, to appreciate each other. And as I go around the state thinking about my future, one of the things that never ceases to amaze me is that in regions of the state where I literally used to be afraid to go at night, I find that the schools are more integrated than they are in the school systems of Atlanta and Decatur, that they have one school system. Everybody black and white goes to the same elementary school. Everybody black and white goes to the same middle school. Everybody black and white goes to the same high school. And the teachers have become friends. And the county commissions and city councils have become racially integrated. And one place that I used to be particularly nervous, I went to speak at a Rotary club, and lo and behold, who met me at the city limits was a black police chief. And I realized that there has been such a dramatic change in what is going on in Georgia that most of us who spend the majority of our lives inside the perimeter don't really have an understanding of that. But when people come from other countries, what they see is one place in the world where people with an enormous diversity have somehow learned to live together peaceably and to prosper. And I think that that's going to continue to attract new investment into this area. And a part of what we're trying to do with the Olympic Games is to begin to give Georgia its place in destiny. That come the 21st century, which is really just a decade away, 11 years, we're going to be looking at one of the great regions of the world. And if the Olympic Games are played in and around Atlanta in 1996, that means that approximately $4 billion will come into this region in about a 60-day period. It also means that between 1990, when the designation is made, and the turn of the century, that Atlanta and this region will dominate the news of the world, that we will be, hopefully, a focus of a continuing positive development. And that the kind of thing we saw when the Democrats were here would happen not only when the Republicans come in 1992 and when the Super Bowl is played in a new Georgia dome, but will happen over and over again between now and 1996, and we have the capacity for building in this region a kind of model of what we think an urban and rural coalition ought to be going into the 21st century. I don't see any other regions in the world that have an opportunity to set forth for generations to come the kind of model of a lifestyle that we are in the process of evolving. And so I'm extremely optimistic about what's happening here. The only way I really can't explain it, but there is a sense in which people, maybe because we're not ashamed of the fact that we are believers in a creator beyond ourselves, maybe it's because we have been able to learn to humble ourselves ethnically enough so that we can begin to appreciate the strengths of the opposites. Maybe it's because we've been daring enough to believe that we could create an environment where nobody need be hungry and where nobody need be naked, and where we could educate all of our children to the maximum of their ability and include everybody, regardless of race, creed, or color, in a lifestyle that gives them the opportunity to do the best that God will enable them to do. That this, as much as we struggle with it, is one of the few places on earth where this is taking place. We still have people in Ireland that are killing each other over being Protestants and Catholics. That seems ridiculous to us now. And they're all white. We just got over a war in Iran and Iraq with two different types of Muslims who had a bloody massacre over religious differences. Those kinds of things are unheard of. And we have somehow gone way past that in this country. We've learned to coexist sacred and secular. We've learned to respect a private economy and also the value of a free decision-making base called democracy. And we are allowing that democracy and that free market system to mature in this region to the extent that I think, with all of our faults, we become a place of hope for many people on the planet in which we live. Because this is one of the few places on earth where such enormous diversity is being encompassed so graciously and so peacefully and prosperously. And so I would stop now and say that that's the sort of thing that I see happening with us. I think our chances are better for the Olympics than I could ever have imagined. Everybody else is making mistakes, and so far, God bless us, we've been struggling along, and people have been telling us that we're doing everything right. A lot of what will be the future of the Olympics will probably be involved in the Greek elections. And while I don't wish them any ill, I think it would be very hard for a newly elected government, whatever that government is, to do all that has to be done to make Athens ready for a 100th anniversary celebration in 1996. By the same token, I think for the past 25 years, people have been working to build the busiest and best airport in the world. When you get through downtown Atlanta now, thanks to DOT, our biggest problem going through downtown Atlanta is not getting tickets because traffic moves at rush hour at 60, 70 miles an hour now. MARTA is connecting to the airport and right downtown, and now going on out to the perimeter through Georgia 400 and off to Perry Holmes. And so much seems to be happening that's good and wonderful and right here that I just count it a blessing that I've been able to be a part of it and to be able to share my view of it with you. And I'll be glad to answer your questions.
not to answer. Some way, when you get these people and you need to get them, you need to move them out of the combat zone. Otherwise, you run the risk of making a criminal out of the child. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Let me say that there's nothing that, that has plagued me more than that whole series of problems. I'd just like to remind you, though, that we were 20 years getting to this point. That there was a period in the 60s when drug use was sort of popular, was considered a kind of sophisticated fad. There was a time not long ago when almost everything that was wrong with our children, we were quick to give them a pill in school to keep them quiet. I mean, we've generated a drug-dependent society. And I think part of it, and forgive me for starting with my foundation, which is the preaching part, that I don't have any trouble with my 16-year-old taking care of his automobile. He's not going to let anybody sprinkle sand. He's not going to let anybody put fingerprints on his car, because he respects the value of his car. And so I asked him, I said, look, if you just take as good a care of your body as you take of your car, if you know that your body is the temple of God, and don't do anything that's going to defile it, just as you wouldn't let anybody put water in your gas tank, don't put anything in your body that's going to interfere with its maximum efficient running. And those kinds of old-fashioned things that people used to tell us aren't said much anymore. And I think we've got to depend on, starting with our churches and our homes, to give people a sense of the fact that they are creatures created by a creator, and that they don't belong to themselves. And whatever their religious faith, somebody made them and made them for a purpose. And even in jail, the most effective answer to drug treatment that I've heard about is a young man that I heard really organizing or testifying in one of the workshops that we had a workshop that was run by high school dropouts in the Cities in School program. And the city just gave them some money and made available the Georgia World Congress Center. And they got about 500 kids together, and they were young women who had children out of wedlock. They were kids who had been on drugs. Some had been in prostitution. Many of the boys had been on drugs and had been to jail, but somehow had found their way back, and the consistent message that seemed to go through that. In fact, one boy told it most dramatically, saying that here he was, had robbed his family and had stolen in his neighborhood, and he was in jail eating 3 meals a day, and he looked on television, he saw people starving in Ethiopia who'd never done anybody any wrong. And he began to realize that he was wonderfully blessed by God, and he all of a sudden wanted to do something about it. Well, you know, that doesn't have anything to do with being poor. Poor people used to get by without drugs, and poor people in my little congregation down in Thomasville in Georgia didn't have any money, but they had strong family values. And if their children had babies out of wedlock, somebody took care of them, and the children were brought up with good health and given the best possible education. What I'm saying is that drugs are a terrible threat to our society, yes. But I think one of the things that I see it doing is reminding us all that we just can't continue to go along and take all of our meaning in life for granted. That we've got to spend some time sharing meaning and purpose and values with our young, whether they are our children. I just got through going to 7th grade commencement, and because somebody else did it yesterday and I couldn't look those kids in the face in a poor neighborhood, I said, look, I don't have any money, and I can't guarantee you that I will send you to college if you finish high school, but I can say this, that anywhere I am, you know, in 5 years when you're ready to go to college, if you come and knock on my door, I will find a way to help you. And that's 43 kids that I made a commitment to. There are another 150 1,500 kids that Mr. Argenbright bought bicycles for yesterday. And suddenly the people who have adopted schools, and that includes many of you, and who have begun to take some time relating to some young people, all of those things, I think, together, plus very strong and determined and tough police work, are going to, I mean, we're going to keep Underground straight. The Rouse Company operates in some of the most drug-filled climates in the nation. And yet you have not heard of any kind of criminal activity in any of those Rouse projects in Baltimore or Boston, New York, New Orleans, and you won't hear about it in Atlanta. And when we put our minds to doing something in this community, we usually find a way to do it, and I hope this is one that we're going to be able to do and do pretty well too.
As you travel around the state and ponder your future, how do you feel about your prospects for another public job?
I feel very, very good. In fact, the truth of it is, I think that just some things that I need to do to make sure that I've done what I need to do with the city of Atlanta. And I've got to do a lot of traveling this year to make sure that we have the Olympic votes. You're looking at 50 votes out of 96. And just a simple majority, but they come from 73 countries. And we're getting a lot of support, though, from places. We even got what I felt to be an encouraging response from the Russians. And Georgia Tech has had the Russian baseball team here. Ted Turner had the Russian basketball team. There was a junior Russian basketball team here 2 weeks ago. There'll be a swim and meet out here at Emory with the Russian swimmers. And it looks like even the Russians might be interested in coming to Atlanta.
You touched on the safety program at Underground Atlanta. Underground before failed because I think we failed in security. You're putting a tremendous amount of money down there.
Can I argue with you on that? Just expand it. I would say that you're right, but if we stop and look at all that went into the breakdown in security, we're talking about the construction of MARTA, and we totally tore up downtown Atlanta and exposed Underground from all sides while the MARTA downtown station was being constructed. At the same time, we had a turn down in the economy that was a result of the oil crunch in the late 70s, and every bank even changed presidents in Atlanta in the late 70s. We also introduced the 18-year-old drinking age. So a lot of teenagers, you know, where people were going to Underground and spending $20, $25, suddenly the crowd changed and you had a bunch of kids spending $2 each. And Underground was never had a centralized management. It was never planned. And we didn't really put any significant capital investment. We sort of cleaned up and painted up what we had and opened it up, and it lasted for 10 years. I think now we've got a sound security plan, we've got a well centralized management, and we put $142 million into it. So I'm sure it's going to work. It better.
Could you share some of the highlights of your recent trip to the Soviet Union with us?
The highlight of our trip to the Soviet Union was probably watching Soviet citizens looking at television and I mean, gathered around looking at their Congress in session. And all day and all night, that's all you could see on television. And though I don't understand any Russian, it was obvious to me and from our interpreters that Gorbachev is one smooth operator. And he is handling that thing masterfully. And that was one high point. The other high point was the sense in which the government really understands that it has to open up to private investment, and that it wants to learn how to do business in a free market environment. And I think that once they figure out how to make the ruble a convertible currency, that's going to be one of the biggest markets in the world. Our sister state, Georgia, and our sister city, Tbilisi, is a very rich natural resource, all kinds of fresh vegetables, but they don't have food processing. They don't have decent roads. They don't have a trucking system. So 30 to 40% of the food that they grow spoils. It's simply a matter of developing the kind of support system. I was telling John Adderhole that the kinds of things that we take for granted in terms of rebuilt parks and maintenance, even the stuff that they make that's good, they don't have a system to maintain it, so there's no system of spare parts. It really makes you appreciate our society. The one thing that they do well, though, and that I could find no fault with, even in our sister city of Tbilisi, which is just about 1 million people, they've got a very, very fine rapid transit system. Every Soviet city, I've only visited 4, Leningrad, Moscow, Tbilisi, and Tashkent. But every one of them has mass transit systems that are as modern and efficient as anything we've got. They also build housing. They build a lot of it, though it's not what we would consider luxury housing, but at least they are building housing for people. Consumer goods, soap, lipstick, that sort of stuff just isn't available. In fact, it's the only place I've been where I really couldn't find any presents to bring home. And one of the reasons is that I was there in '85, and in '85 there were only about 14,000 American tourists per year, and that was a big year. This year already the U.S. Embassy has given out 70,000 tourist visas. So Americans have been coming in, and anything that's pretty decent they've been buying up.
It is my privilege and my duty to thank a most distinguished guest and speaker for his time and for his thoughts. You mentioned, sir, that Atlanta is a place of hope. That's partially because you're bringing a message of hope, and we thank you for that. Also, I would like to make a personal observation of thanking our speaker for being an awfully, awfully good neighbor. It's fun to be Atlanta's next door neighbor, or at least it's fun to me, and I think I speak for virtually all of us. I was reminded of the neighborliness of our mayor when I asked him before. I said, how would you like to be addressed? Is it Reverend Young, or is it Mr. Ambassador, or what have you? His response was, I'm Andy. Andy is our neighbor, and for that we're thankful. Andy, many thanks. The meeting is adjourned.